you for that. Thank you for the privilege of this. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, as of this week, you may or may not know this, but as of this week, Elon Musk has a net worth of nearly $500 billion, making him far and away the richest man in the world. In fact, he is almost 40% richer than his nearest competitor in the list of the world's wealthiest people. And I heard someone say recently that it's at least possible that Elon Musk might reach a net worth of $1 trillion by the end of the decade, which is just an impossible, well, you can't even imagine what $1 trillion looks like. But that is a bit of speculation. And I will say the person who said that was trying to make an argument that somehow the government should put a cap on how much money Musk can have, and they should stop him at $999 billion and then give the rest away or something. I don't know. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. No matter how you look at it, though, that is a ton of money. It's enough to make a lot of people very jealous. And that's something we want to look at today in the book of Proverbs, right? So I want to kind of draw our attention to the book of Proverbs, thinking about this idea of money. And we look around, people like Elon Musk and others who have wealth. And the Bible has a lot to say about money. Solomon in the book of Proverbs has a lot to say about money, about wealth, about possessions. And as before, I'm not trying to do a thorough study, okay? It would take us all summer just to work through everything Proverbs says about money. Even then, I'm not sure we could do it, but it would be a very lengthy study. And today, I'm just trying to give you a few of the things that we find in especially Proverbs 17 through 23. So this is kind of my focus this week, is just those handful of chapters and trying to kind of just get a little bit of a survey of what they say about this, all right? Some of the key Proverbs that deal with the subject. So here's the question, okay? Here's a question that will help us to think through this. Should we be jealous at all of Elon Musk? Should we make it our goal to follow his example and amass as much wealth as possible? Now, the world says yes. Just a quick search on YouTube reveals just the top videos that I found that have titles like this: 10 strategies to build wealth, how to create wealth from nothing, how to build wealth on a small income, and on and on and on. Our world is obsessed with this idea of building wealth. But listen, let me help you here, because it's easy for us to point at the world out there and say, well, the world is obsessed with wealth, as if we're not. But the reality is, Christians are often just as much on board with this as everyone else. Who hasn't heard of Dave Ramsey? Multi-million-dollar personal finance guru. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not about to trash Dave Ramsey here. Don't misunderstand what I'm doing. What I'm saying, though, is that churches all across the country have used and do use his financial peace curriculum in Sunday school classes and small groups, and their purpose in doing that is helping Christians get out of debt, helping Christians to build personal and generational wealth. I mean, who could argue with Dave's very common sense advice, right? Get your spending under control. Get focused on paying down debt before you invest in retirement and all these kind of things. That just makes common sense, right? Now, one thing we have to keep in mind, and this is important, we have to recognize how much our culture affects our thinking, right? This happens without us really even realizing it. This is a thing that I think is really something we don't give enough attention to. How much has my thinking been affected by the world around me, by the culture, right? C.S. Lewis once made a statement about the kind of this concept. We're so accustomed to what we're around. He says, for example, a fish doesn't know he's wet, right? Because the fish, this is what he lives his life in water. He doesn't know he's wet. Okay? You and I live in this culture, and so much of what we think and the way we act and the values that we follow are really just things that we assume from our culture, and we don't even realize it. So it's important for us to accept that, and then for us to stop maybe and think a little bit, maybe examine those things. It might seem like a no-brainer to say that even as Christians, we should follow the advice of someone like Dave Ramsey, and we should seek to build generational wealth. But we need to be willing to examine every assumption. This is really important. This is what I'm really getting at here. It's not a question of Dave Ramsey. It's a question of, are you willing to examine every assumption that you have, including the things that make that seem really, really, really common sense, logical? Yeah, of course. We should just follow Dave Ramsey's advice. So what does Proverbs say about money and building wealth? And that's what I want to look at this morning. And what we really want to focus on this morning is a few of what are called comparative proverbs that speak about wealth. And then, Lord willing, next week we're going to look at some other kinds of proverbs about money. But today I want to focus on some comparative proverbs. What are comparative proverbs? Well, comparative proverbs are ones that use better than language. Okay, so for example, Proverbs 8 and verse 11 says, wisdom is better than jewels, and all desirable things cannot compare to her. I mean, jewels are good, right? But nothing is better than wisdom. That's what Proverbs 8:11 says. So we think about that. It's a comparative, all right? And so what I want to do is I want to ask a simple question today a few times. What is better than money? Does Proverbs tell us, by using comparative proverbs, are there things better than money? And Proverbs says, yes, there are. So look with me there, Proverbs chapter 17 and verse 1. We have our first thing here, our first entry. Better is a dry morsel with quietness than a house full of feasting with strife. Better is a dry morsel with quietness than a house full of feasting with strife. So what's better than money? Maybe you can figure it out from the verse. Maybe you can tell me, what's better than money? Yeah, peace. What's better than money? The answer is peace. I mean, does anybody here like eating stale bread? Don't think so, right? Now, if it's the only thing you have to eat, stale bread will keep you from starving, right? But if you have a choice between eating stale crust of bread or a fresh baked loaf of bread, it's a no-brainer which one you're going to choose, right? But then what about when you compare it to an entire feast? A dry crust of bread compared to an entire feast? This is not a difficult question, is it? Everyone is going to choose the feast, right? You show up at your mom's for Thanksgiving, and what has she got? The table is piled high with all sorts of good things. And she says, well, you can have this, or you can go in the other room, and there's a week-old loaf of bread, and you can have the heel. Again, it's not even complicated. It's not difficult. It's easy to see which one is better. Now, what does this have to do with the subject of wealth? Well, it's not explicit here, but the idea is, what's the difference between having only a crust of dry bread or a family feast? Well, the difference is if you have money, you can afford the feast. But if you can't afford the feast, what are you going to eat? Well, you're going to eat the dry bread because it's all you got, right? So that's the implication here. That the person who just has the dry crust of bread is not very well off financially. They don't have a lot of money. They have just enough money to get the week-old bread, and that's all they can afford, right? Maybe some of you have been there at some point in your life where that's all you could afford was something like that, and you didn't have anything nice. You didn't have a feast. You just had enough to live, and you ate the bread, and it was okay, and you figured out ways to do it. Now, we live in a very different time and place from ancient Israel. It's important for us to remember that. We come to the Bible. The Bible is a very different place than we are. And so, as Americans, our problem as Americans is typically not that we don't have enough. Really, what's our biggest problem is we have an overabundance of rich foods. So, in America, we have an epidemic of obesity. We don't have a problem with people starving to death, for the most part. This is a sign of the great wealth of our society. We don't often have to choose between eating only stale bread or having a feast. So we all know which one we would choose, right? Of course we take the feast. Nobody turns down the feast to get a crust of dry bread. We prefer to have an abundance of food because an abundance of food means we have an abundance of wealth. And by the way, Solomon agrees with that. He's not saying it's wrong, right? But what if those riches come with family conflict? But this is where the thing gets complicated, right? Is it worth it to eat a feast in a house filled with turmoil? Do you want to sit down at that Thanksgiving table when you know it's going to be awkward, uncomfortable, and there's going to be arguing and fighting? Solomon says no. He says, if we think about this, a comparative proverb here, the comparison between the two, yeah, we all want to have the feast, but the answer is if I've got to have family conflict, if I've got to have arguments and strife and conflict, I don't want the feast. I'd rather just have the dry crust of bread and have peace. Again, I think back to 2020, the whole COVID-19 thing, right? And what that did to families, right? Families turning against each other, right? Do we let grandma and grandpa meet the new baby or not? Do they get to hold the baby or not? They got a mask. They got a no mask. They got a, whatever, right? Social distance. I don't even remember. I just know there was all of these problems, right? All these conflicts, and some of these families separated over these things, right? And some of you maybe experienced that personally. And here we are 5 years down the road, and in some cases, those rifts are not healed, right? And there still are families that are separated over political issues and things that happened 5 years ago in our society, right? I think if you think about that a little bit, you can appreciate what Solomon is saying here. You can have the kind of wealth that lets you eat gourmet meals every night. But the best tasting food doesn't bring much satisfaction if you have to eat it with people who can't stand to be around you. Robert Alden puts it this way. He says, the people you eat with are more important than what's on the menu. See, peace is more valuable. That's what Solomon is telling us. You can buy rich food, but you can't buy the peace in which to enjoy it. Solomon said it again very descriptively in chapter 15 and verse 17. Better a meal of vegetables where there is love than a fattened ox with hatred. Proverbs 15:17. Again, your choice is a meal of vegetables or the fatted calf, right? Which one are you going to choose? Well, of course, I know, oh boy, I don't want to step into it, but I know that there's some really strange people out there that just eat vegetables. And even worse, there's like vegans and stuff. Don't get me on that. But really, any normal person knows. Like, of course, you can have the ribeye steak, or you can have a bowl of mixed veggies. Like, which are you going to take? Okay, well, duh, right? Give me the steak, slather some butter on it. Let's go, man. But that's the thing, right? Solomon says, of course, everyone knows that's a no-brainer. However, let me make it more complicated. If you take the fatted ox, you get hatred. If you take the vegetables, you get love. Solomon says that's actually now an easy choice. Take love with the poor food. Because it's better to have that than have all the wealth, to be able to enjoy the fatted calf, but have a house filled with hatred. But you can't buy peace. I think Psalm 37:16 actually makes me think that Solomon learned this lesson from his father. It's one of the things that I think is interesting when you read the book of Proverbs and you find some cross-references to the book of Psalms. And maybe some other places, but especially the book of Psalms. And you'll see sometimes that Solomon is actually simply communicating truths that his father wrote about in the book of Psalms, when David wrote Psalms. And so Psalm 37 and verse 16 says this, the little that the righteous has is better than the abundance of many wicked people. Again, abundance is wonderful. David said, listen, it's better to have little and be righteous than to have a lot and be wicked. I think Solomon, he was embracing that principle and he's applying it here. If you're going to have abundance, but you're going to have conflict and hatred, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Money is not more important than peace. Right? It's great to have an abundance of food, but it's better to have peace at home. Now, another question then. What's better than money? Let's go to chapter 19. Proverbs chapter 19, and we'll read verse 1, and then another verse 2. Verse 1 and verse 22. Here's what he says. Two comparative proverbs, both of them related. Better is the poor who walks in his integrity than one who is perverse in his lips and is a fool. And skip down to verse 22. What is desired in a man is kindness, and a poor man is better than a liar. So what's better than money? Truth? Integrity? What's better than money? Well, again, it probably would not surprise us to hear Solomon say that it's better to be poor and honest than a rich liar. But actually, that's not what he says in verse 1 and verse 22. He doesn't mention riches at all, if you notice. He mentions being poor in both verses, never mentions riches. What he's saying is that it's better to be a righteous poor man than to be a wicked poor man. So the comparison isn't really between having wealth or poverty here. It's really between being a person of integrity and being corrupt. Like that's where Solomon's focus is here. What's most important? It's being a man or woman of integrity, not being corrupt. Being truthful, not being a liar. Verse 22, it's interesting. The first part of verse 22, look at that, because remember, most proverbs are 2 lines. A few of them are 3. Most proverbs are 2 lines, and a lot of times the 2 lines kind of play off of each other. This Proverbs 19:22 is interesting because the first line, notice what he says, what is desired in a man is kindness. He tells us something positively here. What is desired in a man is kindness. Now that word kindness is a fascinating word. It's a really interesting word. It tells us what is the most desirable thing. Okay. What is the most important thing? And what is it? Well, if you read different translations, you get different answers. Okay, so I just read it in the New King James. It reads kindness. What is desired in a man is kindness. The Christian Standard Bible reads fidelity. The ESV reads steadfast love. The NIV reads unfailing love. Okay, well, those are all interesting terms, but not all necessarily, kindness, steadfast love, fidelity. It's hard to say. What is this word? Well, the word in Hebrew is the word chesed. And if you've been with us for a while, going way back, all the way back to our Psalm study, which we did from 2015 to 2020, if you were here for that, most of you weren't, but if you've been here for that, we spent a lot of time repeatedly talking about this word, hesed, because it's used in the Old Testament hundreds of times. It's a very, very, very common word in the Old Testament. It's also one that's really, really tricky because there's not a really good word in English to translate this word. It's just complex. And there's dispute about what it means. But this word, this Hebrew word, hesed, it kind of refers to all of these things. It's why the different translations kind of use different words, because all of these are really kind of under the umbrella of this term. It has the idea of loyal, steadfast love, of faithfulness, fidelity, and a kind of compassion that prompts you to act in a certain way. So there's this idea of faithfulness, of love, of kindness. And specifically, it seems to be tied to the idea of a covenant. If you remember, the book of Proverbs is written to the Israelite people who were living, they were what we would call a covenant people, because God had made a covenant with the nation of Israel. Back when Moses was alive, right? Moses at Mount Sinai, and he goes up and gets the tablets, right? We think about the 10 Commandments. But the 10 Commandments are really the heart and soul of the covenant that God made with the Israelites. And a covenant is much more significant than even a contract, right? We think about a contract is a legal arrangement, but a covenant is deeper than that. It's more significant than that. A covenant is about establishing a relationship. That's why we use the word covenant when we talk about marriage, because we speak of the marriage covenant. It's a legal arrangement, but it defines a relationship, right? A covenant is a deep thing. It's a very significant thing. And God is often described in terms of his hesed, his faithful, loyal, steadfast, unchanging love and kindness, that very compassion that causes God to keep his covenant promises to his people. Right? And this is what Proverbs 19:22 says is the most important thing. It's the one thing that is most desirable. Hesed, kindness, faithfulness, loyal, steadfast love. A compassion that causes us to keep our covenants. That's what this word is. John Kitchen says that the word is descriptive of covenant love and faithfulness. It is a mercy, kindness, love, and compassion that flows from an unalterable commitment made to another. He goes on and he says, it's not hard to see why this is a quality desirable in those with whom you build relationships. That's why Solomon says this is the thing that is desirable. This kind of loving faithfulness, this hesed, often describes the love that Yahweh has for his people. And what's the contrast here? This is the thing, verse 22. What is desired of a man is kindness, but then look at the contrast. Better a poor man than a liar. We come back to this. This is it, integrity. Hesed has a lot to do with integrity. It means that faithfulness, that ongoing steadfastness, that unchanging. I've made a covenant and I'm going to keep it. That's the attitude. Integrity is something that cannot be bought. Being the kind of person who helps others because you genuinely care about them is far superior than promising to help but never following through. Even if you're poor. Sometimes we don't help people because we can't. We don't have the resources to help them. But far better to be the kind of person who does what he promises, instead of promising something and then not being able to do it, not being able to follow through. Solomon says some similar things in a few other places. For instance, in chapter 15 and verse 16, he says, better a little with the fear of Yahweh than great treasure with turmoil. And chapter 16, verse 8, better a little with righteousness than great income with injustice. Maybe the clearest example is in chapter 28, verse 6. There he says, better the poor person who lives with integrity than the rich one who distorts right and wrong. And so this emphasis on personal integrity, this is the thing that is better than money, is being a person of integrity, a person who is characterized by the very same quality that God is characterized by, this steadfastness, this loyal love and kindness. That's the characteristic that is most valuable, and it's something we find in God. But it's far more valuable than money. And again, I think we can trace this little bit of wisdom back to Solomon's father. We went to 1 Chronicles 29. David was collecting offerings for the construction of the temple that his son Solomon was going to do. Solomon was taking the throne. David was stepping down, and he was preparing offerings. And here's what he said. He prayed in 1 Chronicles 29. And this is part of his prayer. He says this in verse 17, I know, O my God, that you try the heart and delight in uprightness. Now listen to how David describes himself. I, in the integrity of my heart, have willingly offered all of these things. David prioritized integrity, and Solomon got the message. So he is saying here, integrity matters. God delights in uprightness. God delights in the integrity of the heart. And so it's not surprising that Solomon highlights the very same quality. Remember the question that Jesus asked, Matthew 16. Jesus asked a simple question. I think we know the answer to it. What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? The wise man or woman knows you cannot put a price on personal integrity. So we have two answers to the question. Third question. A third time we'll come back to the question. What's better than money? Turn with me to Proverbs 22. Proverbs 22 and verse 1. What's better than money? Solomon says here, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, loving favor rather than silver and gold. So what is better than money? Yeah, a good reputation. Having a good reputation. Now, Proverbs has a lot to say about a person's reputation. For example, chapter 20, verse 11 says this, even a child is known by his deeds, whether what he does is pure and right. These are your actions. Your actions speak volumes about your character. He says even a child is known. He has a reputation based on his deeds, his actions. We have our own proverbs about this. We say things like actions speak louder than words. Talk is cheap. I came across a Chinese proverb. Talk doesn't cook rice. I like that. It's kind of true, though. Right? It's the same thing. Our actions really reveal what matters most to us. Our actions reveal our priorities. And those actions establish our reputation. Are you someone who is known for doing what is right? Are you someone who is known for showing compassion? Are you known for being a loyal friend? Or are you known for being careless with the truth? Are you known for promising much and delivering little? Solomon says even children develop and earn a reputation based on their actions. It's not a good thing, but I remember when I was in 8th grade, I went to a Christian school in Watertown, and my class in that school got a reputation for being a very difficult class. And I would say we earned that reputation for being a very difficult class. And we carried it with us into high school. And we left that Christian grade school and went to a Christian high school in Watertown, and we carried with us that reputation. And then when we learned that we had that reputation, we went into that, this was a mistake one of the teachers made. We got there as freshmen, and the teacher told us, we've heard about you. So we decided, okay, well, if you heard about us, and you know our reputation, then we're going to live up to it, or down to it, I suppose. And so we did. For 4 years, we did. And I don't say that with pride. It was foolishness, rebellion of youth. But the truth is that even as children, we had established a reputation based on our behavior. We were known. Right? This is true of all of us. There's more, though. Proverbs, I'll give you another proverb about reputation. Proverbs 31 and verse 23. This is the last chapter of Proverbs, and in this last chapter, in fact, it's toward the end of the book, he's describing a kind of the ideal wife. And here's what he says about her. Her husband is known at the city gates, where he sits among the elders of the land. In other words, because of this woman's character, because she is diligent, trustworthy, honest, kind, generous, shrewd, because of all of that, her husband is known in the community, right? He has a good reputation because of his wife, according to Proverbs 31. Reputation, important. So what is that kind of publicity worth? Right? It's really interesting. In this digital age, we actually have companies, businesses, that offer online reputation repair. Right? I don't know if you knew that. It's especially true for like retail businesses and stuff, where you're always looking at reviews. I don't know if you're like me, you're always looking at reviews, right? So what happens if you get a bad review? What happens if the bad review is not really accurate or not really fair or honest? What happens if it is? Okay. But the truth is, these companies, they will seek out bad reviews and they'll contest them. And they will try to get them scrubbed from the internet and try to fix negative search results about you or your company. They have online reputation repair. So I guess in a way, you could put a price tag on your reputation. You pay these companies to do that for you. Okay? It's on the internet. But in truth, there isn't any way to buy a good reputation. Why? Because your reputation is rooted in your character. You are known by what you do, by who you are. This is something that is built slowly over time. Now, there's also some truth to the fact that you can't completely control your reputation, can you? You can't make people think accurately about yourself, right? About you. Everybody ever had somebody just get the wrong idea about you and they just would not let that go no matter what? Anybody ever had that happen? I had a work situation like that years ago when I was in college. I was working at a retail store, and one of the managers there I still to this day don't have any idea what it was. But there was some reason that manager just did not approve of me. And when the opportunity came for a promotion, I didn't get it. And when I asked the general manager, why didn't I get the promotion? I was told, because this other manager doesn't like you and gave you a negative review. And I went, what did I do? I have no idea, right? There's nothing I could do to change that person's opinion of me. So on some level, your reputation is not completely in your control. What is in your control is your character. By God's grace, John Kitchen reminds us of this. You can control your character by God's grace. And ultimately, character is more important than reputation. So reputation is important, and I don't want to minimize that. A good reputation is more valuable than money. I do want to acknowledge that sometimes we can't help the way people think about us. So there's some of that. But the thing about a good reputation is that it's not very easy to build one. It takes a lot of time. Takes a lot of effort, consistency over time. But a good reputation can be lost in a heartbeat. Think about people who are famous. I think about one example I just thought of this week. Famous football coach. Football season starting up, college football really getting ramped up this week. And so all of a sudden, everybody's thinking about that. There's a famous college football coach, Joe Paterno. He led Penn State University to multiple national championships and a nationwide following. One of the most successful football programs in the country. In fact, he had 409 wins as a college football coach. Joe Pa, as he was known, was the winningest coach ever in Division I FBS history. He was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 2007. They even put a statue of him outside the stadium there in State College, Pennsylvania in 2002, I think it was. They put a statue of him there. Paterno was an advocate for academic integrity, and he donated millions of dollars to build up many programs at the university outside of athletics. So he was again, everybody saw and knew Joe Paterno. He was a man with a tremendous reputation. And yet all of that was gone in a heartbeat. In 2011, it became known that one of his longtime assistant coaches had been abusing boys for a decade and a half. And Paterno found out about it, but he never called the police, never did anything to stop this man. Beyond, he reported it to the school's athletic director and then left it alone. Didn't do anything after that. An independent investigation the next year, in 2012, discovered that he had actively covered up the crimes. Of course, by the time they discovered that, he was already dead. He died of lung cancer at age 85. Paterno had a good reputation until it was lost. In fact, he threw it away by failing to live up to the standards he set for himself, the standards he set for the players who played underneath him. He failed to be a man of character, and as a result, he lost his good reputation. And the truth is, there is no amount of money that could be spent that would ever restore his reputation. Couldn't be done. There's absolutely no way that you could ever restore his reputation. Family can't do it. Nobody. There are so many examples of this throughout history. So many examples of Christians who once had good names but lost them through public scandal. And once your name is ruined, it is nearly impossible to get it back. Solomon offers another take on this. In the book of Ecclesiastes, he says this, chapter 7 and verse 1, a good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. This verse is very typical of Ecclesiastes. It's cryptic. It's a little bit difficult, maybe. The first half is not difficult. Okay, it's the second half that we get tricky. Why is the day of one's death better than the day of one's birth? Okay, well, it has to do with this idea of a person's reputation, a person's name. A good name is better than precious ointment. But why is the day of your death better than the day of your birth? Because, Bill Barrick explains it this way, at the beginning of one's life, an individual receives a name. Throughout your lifetime, that name obtains either a good reputation or a bad one, preferably a good one. In fact, one's name accrues value and has the potential of being more valuable at death than at birth. The good, therefore, comes at death. He's not saying death itself is a good thing, but he's saying that the accruing of value that comes with a good reputation over a lifetime means that on the day of your death, your name is much more valuable than it was the day you were born. Because of this reputation. So would you rather have a good name or good ointment? Good perfume? Which one is preferable? Would you rather live in such a way that your name accrues great value? Would you rather be the kind of person that on the day of your death, people say, what a reputation, what a man, what a woman, what a life? Or would you rather spend your life enjoying luxury and material success? Right, that's the choice. Barrick says the wise person will choose that which is better over that which is not. The foolish will pursue the opposite course. So how do we sum this up? How do we sum these comparative proverbs about wealth and money up? Well, we don't really have to because Solomon, I think, does it for us. Turn with me to chapter 23, Proverbs chapter 23, verses 4 and 5. Solomon really kind of puts us all in a bow here for us. Proverbs 23, verse 4. Do not overwork to be rich because of your own understanding cease. Will you set your eyes on that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away like an eagle toward heaven. Now, moms will sometimes say to their kids, well, the kids will complain something like, I can't find my shoes. I lost my homework. Or I can only find one shoe. I can't find the other one. Right? Or something like that. And, and what will the mom say? Well, it didn't grow wings and fly away. Right? Got to be somewhere. Right? But Solomon says that's exactly what happens with money. It grows wings and it flies off like an eagle into the sky. Right? I can just picture, Solomon does this on purpose. He wants us to picture an eagle flying up where you couldn't possibly reach it, out of reach. Because that's what money does. He says, if you're not looking, all of a sudden it sprouts wings and it flies away. So don't wear yourself out. That's what he means in verse 4 when he says, don't overwork to be rich. Don't labor. Don't work to the point of exhaustion so you can be rich. Because if you do, your money is going to sprout wings and fly away. And it'll be like an eagle soaring up in the heavens, out of your reach. It's not worth it to try to wear yourself out to become rich. But I would say this, it's even worse than that, because Solomon would suggest to us here that it's futile. It's a wasted effort to try to become rich, because money has a way of disappearing, flying away. But actually, the Apostle Paul warns us it's much more serious than that. 1 Timothy chapter 6, he says, those who want to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, or a trap, and many foolish and harmful desires, which plunge people into ruin and destruction. Those who want to be rich, those who seek after riches, what do they fall into? A trap. They harm themselves. Now, a lot of people misunderstand what Paul is saying in this passage. They misunderstand the next verse. They think that Paul says money is evil. But here's what he says. He continues on. Because, or for, the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. And by craving it, some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. Here's what Paul's saying. Living for money is fundamentally incompatible with being a Christian. Living for money is incompatible with being a Christian. You cannot do both. Notice I'm not saying you can't have money and be a Christian. Paul didn't say money is evil. Paul said the love of money, the pursuit of money, the desire to be rich. Those are the things Paul says that are destructive. Jesus, again, puts it very plainly. What does he say? You cannot serve both God and money. Jesus says it's very simple. No one can have two masters. It doesn't work. Right? We tell our kids this all the time. Try to get them to understand that, especially the older kids, try to get them to understand the younger kids don't need more parents. They've already got parents. It doesn't work if there's multiple sets of parents in the house. That doesn't work. Right? They don't need more parents to tell them what to do. Because they've got parents. Right? We don't need two masters. Two masters doesn't work. Two masters, it conflicts two masters. You can't serve two masters. Jesus says, nope, you're going to choose one or the other. So you will either choose to serve God or you will choose to serve money. The two are incompatible. You have to choose. Proverbs tells us which is the wise course. There are many things that are better than money. These things that I've shared with you today are just a few. There are a few of the things that Proverbs teaches. They're just a few of the things the Bible would tell us are better than money. And there are probably many more things the Bible doesn't tell us, doesn't specify, doesn't list everything. There are lots of things that are better than money. Lots of things that are better than riches. So the question is, what are you living for today? Now you may think, well, I'm not living for money. I'm not living for possessions. I don't expect to be rich like Elon Musk. I'm not looking at my first $1 trillion by the time I'm whatever that would be. Don't have to say, however old you'll be. That's not the point. Right? I'm not suggesting that you have to be obsessed with becoming filthy rich. But if your entire focus is on gaining personal or family wealth, you are choosing the foolish path. Again, to go back, Dave Ramsey may be a Christian. He may give really good advice. And his advice may be things you should follow. But for many Christians today, I fear that Dave Ramsey and others like him are simply a resource to get the thing they want more than anything, which is wealth and the comforts that wealth provides. So don't underestimate the power of money to become an idol in your heart, an idol in your life. Seek the better path. Seek the path of wisdom. Choose peace. Choose integrity. Choose a good reputation instead of living for money. Or to put it in the terms Jesus used, choose to serve God instead of serving money. I've seen many times over that in the book of Proverbs, the call of wisdom is really the call of discipleship. It's the call to follow Jesus in the fear of the Lord. To do righteousness, to live by faith, to seek peace, to love, to obey, to turn away from self-reliance, to turn away from self-righteousness. This is what, when Proverbs says seek wisdom, that's what it means. Right? It means turn to the Lord. It means trust Him and follow Him. Money is just one more arena of life where really the opportunity for you today is this. You can you can get a little spiritual temperature, right? Take your temperature. We do that if we want to find out if someone's sick or not. What's your temperature? Let's get a measure of how your health is right now. And money is a way to do that, right? Are you serving God or are you serving money? Are you living for wealth? Or are you living for the Lord? Let's pray. We'll ask God to help us to know our own hearts and to turn